Hi, I'm Karen Wilkins-Mickey. I'm the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with the Seattle Seahawks and going into my 5th season here. Thank you so much for joining us on the very first episode of Our Journey Forward. For the past 3 years, the Seattle Seahawks have partnered with the Institute for Common Power to send members of our organization on a life-changing, week-long experience in the South, gaining a deeper understanding of Black history in America by visiting where key events took place and meeting some of the heroic men and women who were on the front lines of the civil rights movement. The name of this series, Our Journey Forward, refers to what we experienced on this Institute for Common Power Truth and Purpose Learning Tour. Our Journey Forward is also what we are still going through today. The theme of this episode is the bus, which we will explain and get into shortly. But first, let's meet our panel. To start, we have someone all the 12s will recognize. First round draft pick in 2022, drafted 9th overall out of Mississippi State and current offensive tackle for the Seattle Seahawks, Charles Cross. How you doing, Charles?
I'm doing great. How about yourselves?
So good. How's the off season / training, all those things?
It's been going very well. Just getting back in the building and being with the guys has been a great experience.
Yeah. We love having you back in the building.
I love being here.
Thank you so much. Charles, you were part of the most recent tour in April. And as our next guest, Jeff Dunn. Jeff's our Chief Strategy Officer for the Seattle Seahawks. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And last but not least, Dr. Terry Ann Scott.
Hello.
We bow to her. Terry's the director of the Institute for Common Power and an award-winning professor of history. Terry was one of the creators of the Truth and Purpose Learning Tour and co-leads the journey with her colleague, the amazing Dr. David Domke. She provides knowledge, context, and insight for everything on this trip. I can't say enough about that. Dr. Terry, would you like to inform the audience about the Institute for Common Power? Just tell us a little bit about it and the goal of the organization, and then also the Truth and Learning, the purpose of the Truth and Learning Tour.
Absolutely. So I, as you mentioned, I'm a former professor of African American and U.S. history, and I left that position, a tenured position, to become the director of the Institute for Common Power. We launched actually June of 2022, so we're celebrating our anniversary right now. And we are an educational branch of Common Power, which is a voting justice organization that is based here in Seattle. And so my colleague you mentioned, Dr. David Domke, he had started a previous version of the of the Learning Tours. They weren't called that yet when he was a professor at UW, and that's how we met. I used to teach at the University of Washington as well. And so since we launched the Institute, we started doing this. We launched the Institute to be the educational branch of Common Power so that people could understand our modern environment, so that they could know that when they are encouraging everybody to exercise the power of vote, that when we are pushing to expand the voting population, that we have to know that it's tied to every aspect of our existence, to water, to food, to education, to housing. And we want people to understand the history. And so the Institute does that. We teach people about the history. We do it through workshops, through lectures, through courses. And our hallmark thing, and what is one of my favorite professional and personal things to do, what means the most to me, is doing these Truth and Purpose Learning Tours. They are called this because we know there's an assault on truth, and so we are committed to making sure that people know the truth, because this is all of our collective history and purpose. People may already have a purpose, but we want to reify their purpose or help people find a purpose. And so that's why we have these Truth and Purpose Learning Tours.
I love it. And it's funny, you said 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So we went on our first trip in 2023.
That's right.
So we were sort of new in this with you, right?
You were. So one of the places that we visit, and having to do with the bus, which we can talk about in a moment, is Anniston, Alabama. Mm-hmm. And when you went on the journey, that was something new. So I'd been doing previous journeys since 2017, Dr. Domke since 2013. But our Truth and Purpose was 2022. We changed it because there is an action component. Our motto in the Institute is education to action. And so you come in, the Seahawks, in this partnership with the Seahawks, when we have an understanding that education without action is actually a privilege, that we have to use it to do something. And so some of the places that you got to go, like Anniston, Alabama, are places that we had not previously gone.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm so lucky that we were able to go through that experience. And so we just, in full transparency, we actually went 2 months ago. So we're having sort of a reunion with Dr. Terry today, because this is the first time seeing you since April. So time's passed. So I want to talk to you, Charles, a little bit about, what resonated with you. You're from the South, Charles, right? So I know that when I asked you about this, you were like, at first thinking, well, I'm from the South, how could this really be any different? But what resonated with you being in this capacity and now thinking forward after 2 months?
Well, being from the South, I feel like I had a good understanding of what went on. But after going on the trip and seeing the details of what happened and how it impacted those communities and those people, it made me look at things from a different perspective. As far as like growing up in the South, it was similar. It was similar to what I've learned before, but after hearing and looking and being there physically, it was a different feel for me.
Yeah, I'm so happy you were able to join. I know that you've been wanting to go every year, and finally it worked in your schedule to come to at least part of it. So I look forward to you again.
Absolutely.
And Jeff, for you, as leader of this organization, I know that you've known that this is something that we were going to do since the very first one. So I'd love to know for you, like before the journey, what your initial thoughts were in going into the journey, and then just kind of, was it what you thought?
Yeah, I mean, I had heard everyone had gone the last 2 trips and how powerful the experience was for them, and all of the things they learned and grew from it. But I didn't fully appreciate the impact that this trip has on developing the culture of the Seahawks organization. And, having our coworkers that have all different levels, different demographics, all come together, going through this really powerful learning experience and putting themselves in these vulnerable situations and, experiencing history where it happened, creates this really deep bond between the people that go on the trip and all these coworkers. And I think that serves to really strengthen the culture of the Seahawks. And, we're around these really powerful leaders, just learning from Dr. Domke and Dr. Terry and, all the other civil rights leaders that were also on the trip with us. And, I really feel like it develops this, the leadership culture of the Seahawks and develops future leaders.
I love how you say that, because we were among so many leaders when we were on the trip. But you also talked a lot about the bonding that happens among us that honestly no one can really explain until you go. Like you said, I think we've talked about the trip, since the first trip. But even though I talked about it and you heard from others, it wasn't until you go on it do you actually go through that experience of bonding. And we did a lot of that. So from Atlanta, Georgia to Montgomery, Alabama, Birmingham, and then to Selma. So the topic of this episode is called The Bus because we spent a lot of time on it. And so I'm happy that we're talking about this first. So one of our first stops, you did allude to this and talk to it initially, was our trip to Anniston. And so Anniston, Alabama, we stopped at the Freedom Riders of 1961. And Dr. Terry, would you mind giving us some background on that? Just could you tell us a little bit about the Freedom Riders and especially the state of segregation at that time?
Absolutely. So we leave Atlanta and then we head to Alabama, where we spend all of our nights, 5 nights in Montgomery. But before we get to Montgomery, we stop in Anniston, Alabama. And so as we come into the state, it is with this kind of profound progress that we think about how we're able to cross a state line and go into Alabama as an integrated group and sit anywhere we want on the bus. The only reason that we are able to do that today without getting arrested, without being subject to violence from citizens or from the police in the area, is because of the Freedom Riders. So in 1961, in May, an interracial group of individuals, mostly coming from CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, set out to test 2 Supreme Court rulings. To be clear, it was legal as of 1967 because of a case called Morgan versus Virginia, that you were supposed to be able to ride in an integrated fashion on a bus. But the Supreme Court ruled this, and no local entity nor the federal government decided to enforce it. They defied a Supreme Court ruling. And then a subsequent ruling in 1960, Boynton versus Virginia, dictated that you can't segregate even in the waiting room or the ticket counter or the restaurants or anything. And so because the local municipalities and the federal government was doing nothing and segregation persisted, the Freedom Riders said, we'll take care of this. We will get on the bus. We will bring national and international attention. And one of the first places they stop is Anniston, Alabama. So we go to Anniston, Alabama as a group on this journey, an interracial group, and we get off of the bus at the Greyhound bus station. It looks just like it did in 1961. It's now owned by the National Park Service. And so we learn about them there. We stand with an understanding that we can do this because they did that. And they were beaten. They were beaten in Birmingham. In Anniston, their bus was attacked and it was firebombed. And it was pushed off the road just a couple of miles from where we first go. And then we go on our bus to that site. And they could have been, miraculously, they were not killed. But their efforts, together, which would eventually be over 300 Freedom Riders, would lead to the federal government actually enforcing those Supreme Court rulings and allow us to have the freedoms that we have today.
Which is why we were able to be together, integrated on a bus. Which
That's
is
right.
There's so much intentionality in this tour of where we start and taking this journey. And so, Dr. Terry, we're going to now hear part of the recorded message from a survivor that talked about the attacks in Anniston.
You get that eerie feeling. Everyone on that bus was very quiet. I think we were all thinking the same thing. What are we in for? And when the bus turned down that street, Kearney Street, and then into the area where the Greyhound bus station was, and we saw that crowd, we knew then we were going to be in for a rough time. And since they could not get onto the bus to get us, they started breaking out the windows. Then they started to rock the bus. Now, a large Greyhound bus was being rocked by men outside, but that's the way it was in 1961, when some people wanted to kill 7 of us because we dared to sit in the front of the bus or sit as an integrated group. I will never forget those moments.
Listening to that, I mean, I get chills listening to that. Charles and Jeff, I want to ask you what went through your minds listening to that. We gathered at that space to listen to the recording, which was really powerful. And I'll have you go first, Charles.
Well, first of all, it just made me feel thankful that they were able to do that and create change. It wasn't instant change, but over time it was change. I feel like it just shows how much they sacrificed and how much they cared about doing things the right way, creating equality for everyone. And I feel like they speak so much volume, and it made me see things from a different perspective, especially just being there and seeing it for myself. I felt like I could just see it so vividly.
Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah. Well, I'm in awe of the courage and bravery that, they showed, knowing the hatred and violence that they would experience just for exercising their legal rights. And it felt more personal being in that spot in Anniston, right where it happened. And just, as you mentioned, it looks the same as it did then. And realizing that it didn't happen that long ago. I think one of the original Freedom Riders is still alive, and I'm sure some of the others as well. But that just tells you that this was not ancient history. This is a recent past. And, the sacrifice and leadership that these heroes displayed is a powerful lesson for everyone. And I think everyone on this trip that experienced it took away, the powerful leadership and bravery, courage that was required of these people.
Yeah. It was definitely powerful. And it really set the tone for how this trip was going to be. Dr. Terry, is there anything else you wanted to add about the Freedom Riders that you think it's important for us to know or think about?
I would say the intergenerational, interracial fashion of that. So we just heard from Hank Thomas. He was the youngest of all of the Freedom Riders. He was only 19 years old. And so you actually couldn't participate in the Freedom Rides unless you were 21 and unless you would receive permission from your parents. And so he had to get permission to go on that journey. And as a parent, I always think about what a choice that is to say, yes, I'm going to sign this, to say that you can go and do this, knowing that this could have led to his death. And so he is still alive, and he emerged from that. We actually get to meet. We get on the bus and go to Tuskegee on Saturdays when we're in this journey. We went and we met with Dr. Lafayette, who is also a Freedom Rider. And he was only 21. And so the young people leading the charge in this is just, I never get over how incredible it is.
It really is incredible. So we spent a ton of time on the bus. We talked about that. I'm just curious, like, what was some of your favorite parts of being on the bus together? I have many, but Charles, do you have a favorite? I mean, besides it probably being a little too small for you. I know you made it work, but what was your favorite?
Honestly, just hanging on the bus, talking to you, talking to everyone. Just seeing how being in the South has opened their eyes, and it was a great experience for me. Meeting a lot of different people from different places and hearing their experiences and just learning, just coming in with an open mind and being able to receive the information and take it in.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, what was your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, well, each stop on this trip was intense. So, these bus rides provided a great opportunity to kind of, along with this wonderful, diverse group of people that are on the bus, to kind of process all the information we were hearing, to share with each other what it meant based on our own kind of personal experiences and family histories. And, that's what the beauty of diversity is, that, everyone's going to bring a different perspective, and it helps the rest of us see the same story in a different light.
Definitely. Dr. Terry, do you have a favorite? I know you take the bus all the time, many trips. I know we're your favorite, but I'm sorry.
I love you guys. That's why we keep coming together. Being together on the bus, learning from people, talking and meeting people. Love that. And also, this is heavy stuff, so you got to have a little fun. So I love when we left Tuskegee and had a dance party on the bus. That was great.
Yes.
We need to have that.
Well, because of those quizzes you give us, and we have to be very competitive and beat each other in these quizzes. The trivia is intense. It's intense.
Yeah.
It's intense. Okay, so I wish we could talk longer, because this is great to relive this after a couple months being back. And so we're going to wrap things up. But I do want to give a little plug to the Institute for Common Power. If you want to learn more about the issues that we discussed and find out more about the Institute for Common Power and their Truth and Purpose learning tours, you can visit instituteforcommonpower.org. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we hope to see you again on our journey forward.